a lot of actually technical questions about this project too. Very cool.
So thank you. So Musa and I were talking about how we do this. This is the 12th event since the book came out. So a lot has happened. And he has been my interlocutor at 3 events, one at Wits Anthro, one in Pietermaritzburg, organized by Amafa, and this is the 3rd one. But he has been present in the team, in the audience, at the Forge, at the event organized in Durban by Amafa, and at Wiser. So I felt like he's been my umpelezi, somebody who walks with you, walks along with you. And what fascinated me the very first time we were together was looking at his book and all these markers that he has there. I thought, wow. And at each event, he never had time to talk about why he marked this. Can you see the color coordination? So I was saying to him, you know, Musa, it would be lovely for this event for us to run it more like a conversation, because I felt like you haven't had time to talk about your own engagement with the book, because it's very clear that there's been a lot of things you've been thinking about, you've been working on in your head. So I thought, so he agreed, we agreed this would be the way we open with him, engaging with the book, what it's meant for him, and why he has so many pages marked.
So I use that color, but the notes or the flags have detailed notes or some markers just to remind me of the sections that I want to return to. So for example, the first chapter, so I will use this one, not the one that we used to translate. So I also use this to guide me if I want to come back to the English version. So the first things that sort of jumped out for me was, the South African references. Fanon makes references to South Africa, and immediately when one asked the question, why translate Fanon into isiZulu? So I wanted an answer for myself, and also an answer to give to someone who's asking the question, why Fanon? So there are references to Xaba and Mask, but also the content itself, where Fanon speaks, because one of the ideas of Fanon that often is not sort of engaged properly is the idea of the monarchy, where Fanon writes of how colonial societies are sort of divided.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Can you hear him there?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Very short. So where colonial societies are divided into 2, so the idea of the monarchy. So the city of the settler is well-fed, well-nourished, whereas the city of colonial people is a city of, Fanon uses a description that it matters not where and how they die. Right? It's people that don't matter in that part of it. But also then the continuities of the colonial city or the colonial structure. So one, if you look at post-apartheid South Africa, and there's a certain chapter that when one reads, you sort of think that Fanon had South Africa in mind, looking at how the post-apartheid project has turned out to be issues of dignity, but also at the center of it, one of the flags. Here, Fanon speaks about dignity. And the idea of dignity in isiZulu is 2. And for me, then, when reading this and thinking, in traveling to people that speak isiZulu, the fact that it was resonated, not recognizing people's dignity is not including them in the decision making, because we technicalize politics. And the message of this book, now available in isiZulu because of the label, we are then able to engage these issues of dignity and can be used in political education. So for me, it was also wanted to study the book in isiZulu and reflect on it. And I think at some point we might write something just to reflect. But the whole idea around marking it was to return to certain things, highlight things that I think are important, things that resonate. Indawo ekhanya isibani enemigwaqo ekhonkiwe la inkomo yezihlala icicima ezingajwayelekile nezibabazekayo nezinensalela ezizohlala zasemaphusha. Iy'nyawo zama-colonialist awusoze wayibona ngamehlo ngaphandle mhlawumbe uma usolwandle, kepha awusoze ngoba ungabe ubekwa yini nje lapho. Iy'nyawo zabo zivikelwe yizicathulo ezinohlonzi. Kule ngxenye yendawo imigwaqo ihlanzekile, ishelela kamnandi, ayinamgodi. Ingxenye yama-colonialist yona ishaya kancane, ipholile, ayijahe ndawo ngoba igculisekile. Isisu sayo sihlale sisuthi, siphuphuma okuhle nokumnandi. Le ndawo yama-colonialist ngeyabamhlophe abavela emazweni. Ingxenye yabacoloniziwe noma abomdabu yona ingamadolobha emkhukhu, iMedina, indawo elahliwe nje, elulazekile, ehlala abantu abalulazekile. So this part, Fanon is painting a picture, is descriptive of the colonial town that I mentioned earlier. Just the pictures that he's creating, that the place of the colonizer or the settler, the roads are clean, there are no potholes, there's light. Whereas the town of the colonialized, the informal settlement, so what comes up in my mind is an informal settlement, that people's houses are on top of each other. People are, squeezed in this colonial town. People are hungry. There's hunger. So I like this particular part because I think if one is interested in understanding colonialism, and you look at cities all over the world where colonialism has had an impact, and where people's humanity has been in question, this two sides of the city are present in those societies. So I like this part because when we're thinking of...
Thank you. Now that Richard is here, I wasn't planning this, maybe I'd like to invite you, Richard, to share a bit about the background to how we came to this translation. I mean, you told Griffin a bit, but let's have the whole group listen to the background story.
Instead of a bit more background to who this comrade is.
Yeah, this comrade is going to introduce himself
Okay.
as he explains the background to how the book got translated, because I think that's important. People always ask that question and I have to speak on his behalf.
Okay, my name is Richard. I was running the Johannesburg office of a Global South Research Center. There are offices in Delhi and Sao Paulo and Buenos Aires and Johannesburg. And in India, they were publishing books in the way that I intimated, with no regard at all for copyright. It was in some respects wonderful. If they thought the book was interesting, they'd just publish it, that's how they roll. But there was money, so, not vast amounts of money, but there was money, so we could look at publishing books here. And I'd been interested for many years in seeing if this could be translated. Because I suppose of what I used the metaphor earlier when we were speaking in front of the electric impact of this book on so many people, in and out of universities. I've taught this book in universities from 1995, but also in trade unions and in social movements and all different contexts. And it's not always the same, and sometimes in some contexts there's different parts of Fanon's work that strike people with different kinds of power, but who are Fanon scholars from different parts of the world were all incredibly enthused by that idea. So when we decided to do this, I asked Mulela Tkhela, who was working with us, who's an amazing, amazing guy. He's working for Amafa in KZN now.
I love to read. I like cross-referencing, so I did a lot of reading in order to understand some of what Fanon was saying. Reading by writings by other people who were commenting on what he's saying. Although I was given the task to translate Richard Philcox, I also read Constance Farrington, because sometimes when I got to places when I thought, I don't quite get this, I'd go to Constance Farrington's translation, the one that came in '63, and compare. I have a friend who's a psychologist who gave me a dictionary of psychology and psychiatric words in English. So I was using everything I could to get to a point where I felt like I was translating the best way that I could.
Sorry, I just have lots of questions actually. So when I was at Wits a few years ago was when Fred Kamala was working on Dancing the Death Drum. And then later he wanted to do a version in isiZulu. But he said he sat down to translate his own novel, which was his own story, and it didn't work in Zulu at all. And so rather he retold it from scratch in a way that he thought sounded better in isiZulu. So I'm wondering, was that a problem? Like, does the way that the book is told, does it make sense? Or does there need to be a lot of rewriting so that it sounds right?
That's a very interesting story. It's his own novel
His own novel.
that he couldn't translate into his mother tongue.
He did, but he didn't like it. And so he decided to rather retell it.
That sounds very interesting.
I thought so. Also sounds like a lot of work.
Fred. So, one of the things I found myself having to think about is, if 100 years after I'm dead, somebody wants to translate my work, I would want them to translate it in such a way that it sounds like me. So, the problem of this being a translation of a translation aside, I wanted it to sound like the Fanon I was reading. So I wasn't going to just give the message, I wanted to give it in the way that it is given. So when Fanon changes from an academic language, let me put it that way, to a political language, to a poetic language, I wanted it to read like that. So that's what I did. We're looking at multilingualism within politics and international relations, and how it's a project they started before. As I was busy translating, it's not like because of this. So they invited me because they heard of it, and now they're saying we need to work together into the future. It's a 3-year project. So at the very first meeting that I was invited to, it was just talking about the book. So they're looking at making sure that students who want to write their PhDs in isiZulu can, or whatever mother tongue, because on the written level, the university has the policy that you can do this, but it hasn't been happening. And it's taking intentionality from some of the professors to decide, okay, we're doing it now, and this is how we're going to do it. So there's been that excitement, and I can go on about it. And then there's been what saddens me, and there's also been a pattern about this thing that's been saddening me, the fact that people, and I'm talking about universities here because there's been quite a lot of events at universities, there is a, how shall I present it? There is, people have been fully believing that isiZulu is not capable of being written academically and maybe politically as well because of the nature of this text. And even people who are aware that there are novels that have been translated before or novels that have been written in isiZulu, it's been like, but you know, isiZulu is not sophisticated enough to do this kind of translation. That's been saddening me because the more I would try to engage the people, the more they seemed to hold on to their idea. And so for me, in my head, it's like, so how much of this is actually what Fanon is writing about, you know, starting to see yourself the way you're seen by the colonizer? Because people who know the language know how dense, difficult, complicated it is, and how it has not stayed the same because it's been deliberate about improving, that's not the word I want, it's been deliberate about incorporating whatever has been new in the societies so that it grows.
Would you share how they discovered Fanon and what's interesting about Fanon?
Oh, sure, it was a very long time ago. What I can say is that, no, Fanon was like a bombshell. It had the first serious exploration of the psychology of colonialism, and more importantly, the neo-colonial period. And he says, got us so stuck. Let's look at the apartheid city today. You know, how much has changed spatially beyond the black middle class moving into white areas, but the black working class areas, stuck, under-resourced, the design of, let's say, the RDP encampments is exactly going right backwards. So I think Fanon is a critical thinker, but as you say, you've done a translation of the translation, and then itself poses problems, because I maybe want to take issue with you. The question about how you use Zulu terms is fundamental, because you are reinterpreting. There's no escape from that. In terms of translation,
direction of what we should be going. But one of the things also surrounded around how people interpreted texts that we read, and Fanon was one of those kind of divisive texts. Divisive in the sense that just there were different approaches to what we thought the text was saying versus others.
This, I guess what I'm trying to explore through my work is the concepts of sort of freedom
of colonialism. The Black American experience was, I wouldn't say separate, but it was different. And now we're sort of waiting for a new generation African to reinterpret neo-colonialism and its impact and the path out of this dead end, so to speak. When you talk about Zulu scholars saying, no, the language is not rich enough to deal with this, that is an amazing example of that baggage. The lack of confidence in the transformation of African languages, their development, enrichment.
It was students.
Students, that's even worse. And young people are trapped in their thinking. Yeah, then there's a big task to
just on that note of young people and over to just this guy agrees. They understand our sorrows, imbibe our stories. They carry our memories and create their own. They articulate philosophies and choose fitting actions. They show us our shortcomings. Though they feel deceived, they stand up and speak out, demand and proclaim, occupy. They study while sitting, tweet, post, broadcast the revolution. They have changed the new we thought we had created. Even the sky agrees. The beautiful ones have arrived. So I belong to this generation.
The beautiful ones.
I belong to this generation that understood that reason had to be shifted, that the geography of reason had to be shifted, not just in terms of knowledge of what was being taught at the university, that the university had to be not just geographically in South Africa, in Africa, but it had to reflect in what it teaches, but also to be sensitive to the question of class, that it can't exclude people on the basis of, whether they can afford education or not. And it warms my heart that this body of work, and Fanon was a thinker of the moment, of that particular moment. Everywhere you go, in any campus in this country, students could quote verbatim Fanon, each generation. They could quote Fanon verbatim. And it speaks to the relevance of Fanon in our context. And that not all is lost. That generation is there. It's in different corners. But it speaks to the bigger problem of the left in South Africa, that it's quite in a symbolic state. Perhaps there will be opportunities and moments where we can consolidate, and I think this book will add to that project. Of also making sure that the ideas are not just at the university, but they're everywhere. In helping to us the consciousness of the class, for itself. Now on that note, I'll hand over to you.
Yes, just.
Have you managed to find that short excerpt?
Yeah.
Would it be alright to?
Sure.
Okay. So thankfully, yes, it is. I did remember correctly. It is from Wretch of the Earth.
Which chapter?
I'll have to just check the footnote.
Oh, okay.
I've got managed to get into one of my versions of the chapter. I'll have to navigate later to the footnote. Okay, so the native is being hemmed in. Apartheid is simply one form of the division into compartments of the colonial world. The first thing which the native learns is to stay in his place and not to go beyond certain limits. This is why the dreams of the native are always of muscular prowess. His dreams are of action and of aggression. I dream I am jumping, swimming, running, climbing. I dream that I burst out laughing.
And the editors pointed it out. Oh, wow.
Who actually gave you feedback on your translation?
The editors.
The editors.
Yeah, I had
team
two.
of people.
Well, I had two
Very
editors.
Interesting.
Only one was commissioned initially, and then he got sick. D.B. Zendu. Was I glad, because I used to read his novels as a teenager. He's commissioned, and then he gets ill, and then he invites Naganjani Sibiya. So by the time the manuscript comes back to me, it's got track changes in 2 colors. So I know who's giving me which comment, and I could just choose. It was such fun. I've never been edited by 2 people. So they both agreed that I had skipped a paragraph. Say this,
Quick question, is your appetite for translation being whetted?
Yes,
It's
it's been worded in a very interesting way, because I feel like now I'm interested in translating political texts. I wouldn't want to translate a novel or poetry or anything else. It's been worded in a very unexpected way. Now, why am I forgetting it? Not Women Writing Africa. She put together Daughters of Africa, the first Daughters of Africa version that came out in the 90s. It's this thing. And she looks at women writers from way back and just documents that. And then recently she did Daughters of Africa, an update, and now I'm also in there. But it gives you the history of how women have been writing. And this is a slice of history that doesn't get mentioned a lot. It's, you know, sexism, patriarchy, whatever you choose to call it. Women don't have brains to write, so they're not quoted, they're not referenced a lot, when in fact they are there. And Margaret Busby said, look at this. That clearly impacts on how they write, and you can feel it even if you don't know who they are. You don't have a sense of their biography. Miriam Abba, I read the So Long a Letter. She wrote in French, and I read the English translation. Miriam Abba, Margaret Busby.
Would you like to elaborate on why?
Oh, don't you know them?
This is about you.
Nawal El-Sadawi, the first book I read by her, Woman at Point Zero, I just remember reading that book and thinking, who are you? How can you write like this? Such a beautiful book, Hannah, Hannah, Hannah. And then after many years, I found some of her books. After many years, I got to meet her in person when she came to Johannesburg at one of the events. There was something about Woman at Point Zero that really spoke to me.
Love when it comes full circle.
Exactly.
Great, thank you so much.